Hey everyone, I kind of just wanted to talk about the SpaceX IPO. This has been a massively highly anticipated IPO that we've kind of been waiting on for months now. It's just been building and building and hype, and today was finally the big day. So, what happened? Well, SpaceX ended the day up 20% from where it initially started at. There were points in the day where it got as high as about 30%, which admittedly is why I waited till the end of the trading day, just because with IPOs, you never know. It's a very volatile ride, especially early on. And what can jump up 100% can then end up actually below where it started. It's just insane. But point being, this was a massive IPO, the largest that we've actually had now in history. And SpaceX is now a $2.1 trillion company. Now, one of the reasons I've really been paying attention to the SpaceX IPO is because whether or not you necessarily want to participate and buy shares in it, there is a good chance that in some fashion or form, you are going to have exposure to SpaceX. Now, certain companies like Standard and Poor have made it very clear they aren't going to be changing their policies, so we'll probably end up waiting a year and then SpaceX will get added into all of its big indexes. But already companies like NASDAQ and the Russell series have already made amendments so that you can get exposure into these massive IPOs earlier on than you necessarily would have. So, a lot of people, they might not have necessarily kept up to date with this, but in some fashion or form, your portfolio, most likely, even if you just have broad based index, is going to be gaining exposure. Now, I, out of principle, don't necessarily like investing in IPOs. They kind of have all of the worst parts of the stock market wrapped up in one. So you have your instant, like, everybody is trying to hype this thing, everybody's trying to build suspense. I mean, it makes complete and total sense. It's a major event and you want as much coverage as you can on it, but it just kind of promotes like quick decision making, and oftentimes quick decision making doesn't necessarily lead to long-term financial success. So out of principle, I don't usually participate in IPOs, but this one I did like keeping up and watching with, just seeing what was happening. Now, admittedly, this is a story I've kept up with, and I was really intrigued to see the financials. And admittedly, I have an opinion that is pretty common for the course that most analysts are throwing out there. And that is when you look at the SpaceX financial statements, the kind way of putting it is there's a lot to be desired. The more strong opinion would be it's really bad. Like, you have definitely seen companies that can run a negative earnings and still do pretty successful, but in a sense, they've kind of started going in an opposite direction. They've had some profitable areas, they've had some negative areas, and then now it's just becoming a bigger and bigger money funnel, and you're getting less reward out of it. Like, on the flip side, when we talk about companies who kind of have run that playbook really well, everyone jumps to the but Amazon did it. And my only worry with SpaceX is when we do the but Amazon did it, that's like being like Michael Jordan did it. Every Michael Jordan you have, there are thousands of just NBA players who came in, played a few seasons, and then bounced. Like, the Amazon example is the absolute pinnacle of companies that can kind of run this not positive on earnings playbook to perfection. And one of the things that Amazon had benefiting it was that, well, it was an intentional decision. They could have had earnings, but they were so busy pouring all of their money back into the company that they intentionally decided they would be better off long term if they did that. SpaceX doesn't necessarily have that story in a sense. It's a very volatile ride, and it is a very subsidy and government pleading heavy playbook that will be really interesting to keep up with long term. I mean, we pretty much are going to have to. It's one of the largest companies on earth now, but it'll be quite interesting to see how that continues to play out as their main strategy. Now, another great reason I was keeping up with this IPO is this is kind of a test of where we are in the market cycle. Again, we've been hearing about the major IPOs that are going to be happening. We've had the SpaceX one. We've been talking about the OpenAI one. We know Anthropic is coming. Even companies that were already public have done massive fundraisings, like Google recently issued more shares and kind of showed the benefits of being a publicly traded company. And we know the OpenAIs and the Anthropics were paying close attention to, well, the success of the SpaceX IPO, and for absolutely good reason. And it, it wasn't that long ago, really. It was only a couple years ago that if you were to look at the IPOs happening then, you would be under the assumption that, man, IPOs, they're just dead. They aren't what they used to be. We aren't seeing these massive booms, these massive explosions when companies kind of list for IPO. We had ARM kind of have a bit of a flat IPO. We had some different companies in that little period, like Instacart, that thought they were going to have a really big IPO and kind of, and you have a lot of these companies that think they're going to have explosive IPOs. And for a while, it was actually rumored that, hey, the IPO market is dead. But cut to the AI bubble, cut to all the market craze, and now you're seeing a company that is already massive jump up at points 30% in the middle of the day. It's an insane space to be in, and it's really exciting to see. But this does give me the idea that there will be more room to run. I don't think that this was necessarily out of left field. Like when you talk to people about how they envision the SpaceX IPO going, I don't know that many investment analysts or companies that were like, and this is just going to sink straight to the bottom. Like even the people who have opinions who are more value orientated, including myself, were like, yeah, this is going to soak up all the money. Just like the Anthropic and the OpenAI IPOs are possibly going to follow suit. Who knows what happens by fall? We still have some time on that. But if I'm looking at that as a company, at the different IPOs that are happening, I am feeling very happy looking at the current space for IPOs. We've had a lot of different crypto ones and stablecoin companies that have done IPOs in the past basically year, and they've been seeing great success on the IPO market. So it's a very exciting times. That doesn't mean that I think everyone should be participating and hopping on for the next hot IPO because typically, and I say typically because again, we're in almost unprecedented times. Never have we seen the sentiment be so far one direction and the stock market returns be such like the opposite end. It doesn't make sense. But typically on the IPO kind of market, what you see is you see this massive boom happen the first day, and then over time you kind of see a faltering off. And if the company is really like legit and will stand the test of time, it'll usually kind of come back. But typically, if you want to invest in a company in the IPO market, you're much better off waiting a few months until insiders are actually able to sell, about 6 months usually. And you kind of start seeing then that it'll taper off a bit and you might get your opportunity to buy then at a much better value. So that's typically like what you see out of IPOs. But again, we're living in not typical times. Again, sentiment has like hardly ever been as far negative as it is to the stock market being as positive as it has been. It has been a fascinating time to be in. Now, in terms of SpaceX as a company and where it goes from here, it's a really interesting discussion. Admittedly, I've made it quite clear that I think fundamental analysis and valuation long term is what makes sense. And at some point, we probably, if SpaceX doesn't have a massive boost in earnings, we will see a correction at some point in the future. That's just my thoughts. I mean, it's overvalued right now. I don't know that many people who even like the biggest fans of Elon Musk and SpaceX understand that it's not necessarily you're investing right now for the value that's currently there. You're investing for the overarching story. We have seen that this guy create things that have never been created before, and he might be the person who sends us to Mars, and that company is going to be the beneficiary of that. And it's a really good story. And as we're seeing right now, especially short term, good stories can make money. They can make a significant sum of money. So I don't necessarily know where SpaceX goes right now. I don't think anyone with a full 2020 vision knows, oh, this is exactly where SpaceX is going. But I will say that while this market continues to be as bullish it has been, as we're seeing like the continue AI mania and anything that even is loosely connected to AI is just exploding in value, SpaceX is likely to do well in those market conditions because it's very much a growth story. It isn't a value story. It's not your Walmarts, right? This is a very much growth orientated company that does well in speculative times. But long term, I'm very intrigued to see how this plays out. It's not going to be like if there's going to be a come to Jesus moment or a cratering or it's going to reflect its intrinsic value. I'm not sure I can say with full confidence that it's going to be sub 1 year. It's probably going to be years down the road, just like anyone being like, this is the day the AI bubble pops. They don't know. Nobody knows the exact day, but we all know at some point that the numbers aren't going to be justifiable anymore. And there might be a market correction. Of what size? Who knows? But overall, it's a really intriguing time to be alive. And it's a very exciting one, too, to see like these companies that are actually making some of the coolest products IPO and seeing the reactions of that. So I really appreciate you checking out my video and watching me rant about the cool state of the stock market right now. Thank you very much.